Hello, so this is Rodney from Robbins Racing. We're going to do a quick video about gears. So I get a lot of questions about what gear can I run on my car, or what size do I need, so we're just going to do a quick run through of options, how to figure out what you need, and how to set your gear mesh on your car. First thing I want to talk about is you're going to have different size shafts on your motor. We've got a Castle here that's got an 8mm shaft. We've got a 5mm shaft. And then we've got a 3mm shaft. Most of your 10 scales, you're going to find a 3mm shaft or 5mm shaft. Most of your 8 scales are going to have a 5mm shaft. When you go bigger than that, you typically are going to find your 8mm shaft motors. So once you know the shaft size, then you can determine that's going to be the inside diameter of your gear, right? So the next thing you got to know is, do you need to have a 48 pitch gear? That's the distance between the teeth on the gear. A 32 pitch, or a mod 1. There are some other variations out there, but this is the 3 common ones that you're going to find in RC stuff. Basically, on your motor, you've got a flat spot right here on every motor, and then you're going to have a set screw on that gear. That is how you're going to orientate your gear on your motor. You can also put it on the other way around. It doesn't matter because it's still going to spin the same way. The important part is, once you mount your motor on your car, you want to line these gears up so that your pinion and your spur are centered, right? If your spur is way towards the inside, you may take and flip that gear over. Now, you don't want to run against the motor, but you want it to where you want to try to line those gears up to where they're as centered as possible. But again, you're going to have 3mm, 5mm, 8mm, 3, 5, 8. You're going to have the gears as well, 48 pitch, 32 pitch, and mod 1, right? Okay, so how do you know which gears will fit on your car? So the first thing is, you always want to look at your manual. Your manual sometimes will tell you what your gear ratios are that will fit on your car. In some cases, Traxxas is really good about this. They'll have a chart that'll show you specifically what'll fit, what spur gears will fit to what pinions. If you don't have that, there's another way with a caliper that you can figure that out. And I'm going to show you right here on this car. So, for example, what you want to do is, and I'm going to leave that gear on there to show you, but lightly or loosely mount your motor, right? In this case, what I'm going to do, let me get that screw in there. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to pull that motor all the way out, as far out as I can get it, which is going to be right there. Now, what I can do is I can take my caliper and I'm going to measure the distance from my shaft, the center of my shaft, to the edge of my spur gear, right? And in this case, the center of the shaft, and you're going to try to measure to the inside of the teeth, and you're kind of guessing a little bit, but in this case, I'm going to measure it to be about right there. What that gives me is almost exactly 10mm. If I take that number and I double it to 20mm, my pinion gear on my motor at its maximum can't be bigger than 20mm. Right? That's how you can determine that. Now, you can slide without a gear on there, slide your motor as close to your pinion as you can get, do the same measurement, and that'll tell you the smallest size that your pinion can be. If you know those two things, you can go to any hobby shop, measure your gear. You know, this, for example, is a 10mm gear, right? This is a 22mm gear. So, using those measurements, I can determine what will fit on my car. If you want to run a larger gear, pinion gear, then you're going to need to run a smaller spur gear. What that gives you more distance between them. That's a really easy way of figuring out what will fit on your car, or determining what you can run on your car. We'll do another video later talking about rollout and gear ratio and all that kind of stuff to describe what you're trying to accomplish with your gears. But the basics of mounting a gear, that's how you can figure it out. Calipers are cheap. You can get them at pretty much any hardware store. Very valuable. I recommend using an analog one, or in other words, one that's not digital. The reason being, when you have digital ones, they tend to, the batteries go dead and all kinds of problems with them. These are great. They work fantastic. So let's talk real quick about setting your gear mesh. Let's say you've decided about your gear. You know what you want from your gear. So what you want to do now is you want to set your gear mesh. You've got everything mounted up, which, by the way, when you mount your gear on that shaft, in some cars, like for example with this one, what you'll find is there is a very small shaft slot right here that allows you to get down to that set screw. And that's how you're going to mount that set screw and tighten it down, because basically the other option would be to flip it around, but the shaft's not long enough to do that. So you look for this on some of the cars where you'll have that slot to do that. Always use Loctite. Anytime you use a metal screw to a metal hole, put Loctite on it. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to set our gear mesh. So we have what we call the paper trick. I'm going to show you guys how that works. Loosely mount your motor where it stays in place. Get you a thin piece of paper, tear it off of something. You just need a small strip. Run it between those gears, push it in place, hold it a little bit, because when you tighten down gears, sometimes it'll move. Tighten that down real good, as tight as you can get it. Again, metal screw into a metal piece. Usually you would Loctite that. Back that paper out, and now what you should have is a perfectly meshed gear mesh. So if your car is clunk, 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 clunk real tight, your gear mesh is too tight. If you can take and wiggle this gear, for example, if I hold my spur and I wiggle my pinion and I've got play in those teeth, what's going to happen is, if you have play in those teeth like this, your teeth are too loose. If they're too tight, you're going to smash your teeth. So what you want to do, if you're doing it without using the paper, is as you tighten the gear, the motor of the gear, wait till it stops, and then tighten it down at that point. That's what you want. But ultimately, your car should move freely. If it's clunking around, it's too tight. Okay, so that's how you set the gear mesh on a car. That's how you determine the gears that you want. Again, 3mm, 5mm, 8mm motor shafts. And then you have 48 pitch, 32 pitch, Mod 1 gears. That's going to be your standard sizes on your RC car. Caliper to figure out what size you need by measuring the distance between the shaft to your spur gear at your widest point and your narrowest point. Double that number and you can determine the diameter of the gear that you can fit in your car. All right, thank you guys, and appreciate you watching the videos.